I wasn't expecting him. Not after all these years. Not like this. And definitely not with his hand on my shoulder, saying my name like we were old friends. "Evan?" he said, tilting his head with that same cocky little smirk I remembered. Except now it was older, sharper, more confident. Damn, long time. My brain short-circuited for a second. I was sitting on the padded bench at Westside Physical Therapy, ankle throbbing from the spill I took last week down the stairs. I was halfway into a protein bar and trying not to make eye contact with anyone. And then boom, him. "Luke?" I blinked. "Luke Talley?" "The one and only," he grinned, flipping the clipboard in his hand and tapping it with a pen. "Evan Marcus. 30. Sprained ankle, possible ligament strain. Got you on my schedule twice a week." It was the kind of moment that hits your gut before your brain catches up. I didn't say anything at first, just stared. He still had the same crooked front tooth that I used to stare at in homeroom, trying to decide whether I hated him or was just painfully obsessed. Same jawline, too. But now it was sharper, dusted with a few days of stubble. His arms looked bigger, forearms veined and tan. The polo shirt hugged his chest in a way that made me annoyed I even noticed. I forced a smile. "Didn't realize you went into PT." "Yeah, well, I didn't realize you still existed," he joked, then winced. "Shit, that came out wrong. I meant, like, I haven't seen you since senior year." I let the silence hang long enough to make it uncomfortable. He shifted on his feet. "Want to head back?" he said, gesturing toward the rehab rooms behind the front desk. "I'll get your eval started." I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. The moment I stood, he reached for my arm like it was automatic. "Here?" "I've got it," I said, a little too sharply, stepping past him with a slight limp. He didn't push it. Just walked beside me, clipboard under his arm. Quiet now. I followed him into a small private room with a padded table and a mini fridge of ice packs. The air smelled like antiseptic and eucalyptus. Clean. Clinical. "So," he said once I was seated, rolling over a stool, "before we get started, I should probably say something." I raised an eyebrow. He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I know high school wasn't exactly good. For you. Because of me. And I've thought about that. A lot. Over the years. I wasn't," he paused, eyes meeting mine. "I wasn't cool. I was an asshole." I didn't say anything. He nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, I'm not that guy anymore." I wanted to believe that. I did. But I also remembered every time he tripped me in the hall. The nicknames, the snide comments about guys who look at other guys in the locker room. And now here he was, telling me to trust him, to let him touch my leg, stretch it, hold it, guide it. It felt too ironic, too surreal. "Let's just keep it professional," I said flatly. "Totally fair." He nodded, serious now. "All right, let's start with some range of motion stuff. I'm gonna lift your leg. Let me know when it hurts." As he gently lifted my ankle and rotated it, his hands surprisingly steady and warm, I tried not to think about the fact that Luke Talley, the guy who once shoved me into a locker, now had my leg in his lap. I tried not to notice how close his face was, or how his cologne smelled like cedar and clean laundry, or how his fingers lingered just a half second too long on my calf. But I noticed all of it, and for some reason my heart wouldn't stop pounding. Luke was quiet as he moved through the evaluation, methodical in the way he pressed, prodded, and measured. His tone was completely professional, but there were moments, little glances, the subtle tension in his jaw, where I could tell he was holding something back. "So you said the pain's mostly when you're going upstairs?" he asked, adjusting my foot on the table. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Feels like it's pulling. Not stabbing, just tight." He nodded and scribbled something on the clipboard. "Probably some swelling around the ATFL ligament. You're lucky. Could have torn it way worse." "Lucky's not how I'd describe it," I muttered. He smirked. "Still sarcastic as hell, huh?" I looked at him. Still weirdly familiar for a guy who used to pretend I didn't exist. He winced, then gave a small, sheepish smile. Fair. For a moment, there was silence, the kind that stretches too long to be comfortable. Do you ever think about that? He said suddenly. Back then, I glanced at him. Every gay kid thinks about high school, especially the ones who got shoved into trash cans. Luke closed his eyes for a beat, like he hated hearing it out loud. Yeah, that was one of my worst moments. One of many, I said, because part of me still wanted to punish him. He nodded, accepting it. You're right. I deserved that. I looked away. Why'd you do it? He was quiet. The pen in his hand stopped moving. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe I was just trying to prove something. To myself. To the guys on the team. I knew you were different, and I didn't know how to deal with that. Or what it meant that I noticed. My eyes flicked back to him. What do you mean? I asked carefully. He hesitated, then leaned back on the stool, eyes fixed on the floor. I used to watch you, he said, voice low. I'd tell myself it was just curiosity, that I was just trying to figure out what made you tick. But it wasn't that. Not really. It was something else, and I hated it. Hated what it made me think about myself. I sat up a little straighter. Are you saying you liked me? I asked. He gave a small, bitter laugh. I don't know. Maybe. I didn't understand it. And by the time I started to, you were gone, moved out of town. I never got to fix it. The air felt heavier now. Too full. I didn't know what to say. I had spent years replaying that part of my life like a loop. Angry, humiliated, ashamed. But I never once imagined he thought about it too, let alone this much. Luke stood up and grabbed an ice pack from the mini fridge. He wrapped it in a towel and handed it to me, avoiding my eyes. Keep this on for 15 minutes when you get home, and elevate, twice a day. Okay, I said quietly, taking it from him. He lingered a second, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. My number's on the back, he said, if anything changes with your ankle, or if you just want to talk. I stared at the card in my hand. Plain, minimal. His name printed clean across the top. Thanks, I said, unsure of what else to offer. He gave me a tight smile and turned to leave. See you Thursday, Evan. I watched him go. The door swinging closed behind him. And for the first time in years, I didn't know whether I hated him or wanted to see what would happen if I gave him a chance. The rest of that day, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept playing the conversation back in my head. Luke's voice, the way he looked at me when he admitted he used to watch me, like he was confessing to something shameful, something still heavy in his chest. I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me wanted to write him off. Too little, too late. But another part, the part that used to lie awake at night wondering why him, why me, and what if, that part couldn't stop thinking about him. Thursday came faster than I expected. When I walked into the clinic for my second session, I told myself to act normal, to be distant. But the second I saw him leaning against the counter, sipping from a protein shake and talking to a receptionist, that plan cracked. He was laughing at something she said, head tilted slightly back, arms crossed over his chest. He looked good, like the kind of guy you'd hesitate before swiping right on because you'd assume he's out of your league. When he saw me, his whole posture shifted. His smile softened. Evan, he said, walking over, right on time. I'm punctual, I said, trying to keep it light. I remember, he said, then added quickly. Not in a creepy way, just, I remember you were always early to class, even homeroom. I raised an eyebrow. You remember my homeroom habits? He gave a guilty smile. Told you I noticed more than I admitted. We went back into the same private room. This time, the air felt a little less sterile, a little less like patient and provider, and more like something else was hovering under the surface. Any pain this week? He asked, kneeling beside the table as I sat down. Not really, just stiff. Let's loosen that up, he said, his voice steady, warm. As he began gently rotating my ankle, I caught myself watching him. His hair was longer than it used to be, messier. His jaw was more defined now, his arms more built, probably from years of lifting clients and gym sessions. But it wasn't just how he looked. It was the way he handled me, careful, precise, like he wanted to prove something with every touch. You really became a whole different person, I said without thinking. He looked up. In a good way? I nodded. Yeah. Back then I thought you were just another asshole jock. He exhaled, resting my foot gently back on the pad. I was. But now, I don't know, you seem more human. Luke smiled at that, then looked down. Therapy's good for more than just bodies, I guess. We locked eyes for a second. Something passed between us. Not quite tension, not quite ease. Something in between. He cleared his throat. Okay, let's do some balance work. Why aren't you standing on this pad for 30 seconds? I'll spot you. I stood, awkwardly trying to keep my balance on the foam pad as he moved behind me. His hand hovered near my waist, fingers brushing lightly against my shirt whenever I wobbled. You're doing fine, he murmured, voice close to my ear. I could feel the heat of him behind me. Smell his cologne, subtle, earthy, warm. Every time his hand steadied me, my pulse jumped. When the timer beeped, I stepped down fast, needing space to breathe. You okay? He asked, noticing the color in my face. Yeah, I lied. Just hot in here. He smiled knowingly. Clinic air's always a little dry. After the session, as I was grabbing my things, he stepped toward me again. Not too close, just enough. You doing anything Saturday? He asked suddenly. I blinked. Saturday? He nodded, nervous now. I know this is maybe crossing a line, but I was thinking maybe coffee? Or lunch? Off the clock. I stared at him, caught off guard. You're asking me out? He swallowed. I'm asking to see you. In a way, I never let myself back then. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I'll think about it. Luke nodded, accepting it. Fair enough. But as I walked out, his card still in my pocket, I already knew I'd text him. Because some doors don't close, they just wait to be opened again, years later, when you least expect it. I stared at his name in my phone for a solid 5 minutes before typing anything. I don't know why it felt so heavy. It was just a text. Just coffee. But knowing Luke, or who he used to be, made it feel bigger. Like stepping through a door I spent years locking. Eventually I typed, Saturday works. Lunch, not coffee. You owe me a real meal for the garbage you put me through in high school. He replied in less than a minute. Deal. I know a place. I'll pick you up at noon. That part made me pause. Pick me up? Like a date? I should have said no. But my fingers typed okay before I even finished the thought. Saturday came, and of course he was early. When I opened the door to my building, he was leaning against his car like a goddamn movie scene. Dark jeans, gray t-shirt, one hand in his pocket, the other holding his keys. When he saw me, he smiled. And it wasn't the cocky smirk I remembered from high school. It was something quieter, maybe even shy. Hey, he said, pushing off the car. You look good. You look like you practiced that line on the way here. I shot back. He laughed. Maybe. We drove to this quiet little place near the waterfront. A brunch spot I'd never been to, tucked between a bookstore and a tattoo shop. The kind of place with mismatched chairs and waiters in band tees. I liked it immediately, which annoyed me, because of course he would pick somewhere that felt like me. The host seated us in a corner booth, away from the crowd. Luke slid in across from me and set his phone face down on the table. So, I said, scanning the menu, you always take your former high school enemies out for pancakes? He grinned. Only the ones I used to secretly watch during math class. I blinked. Wait, math class? He nodded, sipping his coffee. You sat by the window, always had your hood up. You'd lean your head on your hand and doodle in the margins of your notebook. I stared at him. You remember that? He shrugged, like it was no big deal. You were interesting. I just couldn't admit it then. I looked down, fiddling with my fork. You know I hated you, right? I know, he said. I earned it. The server came and took our orders. Pancakes for me, omelet for him. We made small talk while we waited. Music. Work. His weird new obsession with woodworking. My ongoing war with my landlord over the busted heater in my unit. But eventually, the conversation circled back. I always figured you were straight, I said finally. That's why you treated me like crap. Luke nodded slowly. I thought I was. Or maybe I just needed to believe I was. The idea of being anything else scared the hell out of me, especially back then. I took a breath. So what changed? He looked down at his hands for a moment. College, distance, time, a couple bad relationships, a couple surprising ones, and a whole lot of therapy. He looked back up at me. I'm not perfect. I still carry a lot of guilt for how I treated you. But I've done a lot of work on myself. And when I saw your name on my schedule last week, it hit me. Like maybe I had one last shot to make something right. Our food arrived. For a while we just ate, the clink of silverware filling the silence. Then, halfway through my second pancake, he said it. I liked you, Evan. I was just too afraid to admit it. I looked up, startled. And I still do, he added. The words hit harder than I expected. There was no smirk this time, no smugness, just honesty. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Just looked at him, really looked at him. And for the first time, I saw past the old memories. This wasn't the kid who used to knock my books out of my hands. This was someone else. Someone who looked nervous to see what I'd do next. After lunch, we walked along the waterfront. It wasn't planned. He just asked if I was in a rush, and I said no before I had time to think about it. The sky was overcast but warm, that kind of soft gray that makes everything feel quieter, more private. We strolled in easy silence for a bit. The air smelled like salt and fried food from the nearby boardwalk. Did you ever tell anyone back then? I asked finally. About, what you were feeling. Luke shook his head. Not until after graduation, and even then, it was a mess. I told one guy in college, roommate, thought he might feel the same. He didn't. Ended up moving out mid-semester. I winced. Damn. Yeah, he said, hands in his pockets. After that, I figured I'd just keep it locked down. Be the cool guy, the reliable one. Make small talk. Lift weights. Laugh at dumb jokes. It's easier that way. I nodded. I knew that feeling all too well. The masking. The managing. The slow, quiet suffocation of pretending not to want something. You ever been with a guy? I asked, surprising myself with the bluntness. Luke didn't flinch. One. Briefly. A couple years ago. It didn't end well. Why? He paused, then looked at me. Because I never really let him in. I kept trying to be who I thought I should be instead of who I was. And eventually he got tired of waiting. We stopped at a bench facing the water. Luke sat first, his thigh brushing mine when I joined him. Neither of us moved away. For a moment, all I heard was the water lapping against the dock, the faint cries of gulls overhead. Then Luke said, "Can I ask you something kind of insane?" I turned to him. Depends how insane. That day in the locker room, he said, voice quiet. Sophomore year. You were changing near the back, and I shoved your locker closed just to mess with you. You remember that? Vividly, I said, eyebrow raised. You laughed and told me to stop staring at dudes. He nodded. Yeah, that one's been eating at me for years. I stayed quiet. But what I wanted to ask, he hesitated, then finally looked at me. Were you staring? At me? I blinked. Wow. Still fishing for compliments after all these years? He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm serious. I looked back out at the water. Yeah, I was. A lot. Luke exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding that breath since high school. Guess that makes two of us, he said. We sat there for a minute, the weight of that truth settling between us. Something raw. Something honest. Then, without turning to look at me, Luke said, I don't expect anything from you. I know I hurt you back then. I know this doesn't make it all okay. But if you wanted, I'd like to try something. See what this could be if we're not pretending anymore. I looked at him. Really looked. And it wasn't the smug jock I used to hate. It was someone real. Someone trying. And for the first time in a long time, I felt safe enough to want something too. So I said, okay. He turned to me, eyes searching. Okay? Yeah, I repeated. We can see where it goes. Luke smiled. Not wide, not performative, just soft, genuine. Then, quietly, he asked, Can I kiss you? I didn't answer with words. I leaned in and kissed him first. His lips were warm, hesitant at first, then firmer when I didn't pull away. It wasn't rushed or sloppy. It was careful, like he'd been holding on to that moment for a long time but didn't want to mess it up. And when we pulled back, it wasn't awkward, just quiet. A different kind of quiet. The kind where you both know something's shifted. Luke blinked like he was trying to process what just happened, his eyes flicking down to my mouth before coming back up. Well, he said, I didn't expect that to actually work. I snorted. Neither did I, he smiled. And for the first time, it wasn't tinged with guilt or old memories. It was just him, present, real. We sat there for a while, not saying much. The breeze coming off the water was cooler now, brushing against the heat still lingering on my face. Want to walk a bit more? He asked. Sure. He didn't touch me as we walked. No arm around my shoulder, no hand-holding. But something had changed. The way he looked at me, the way he leaned in a little when I talked, how his eyes lingered a second longer than before. We didn't talk about what came next, and honestly, I was fine with that. It was enough to know the wall between us was gone. Back in the car, the silence wasn't tense. It was thoughtful, comfortable. He drove me home without rushing, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift. I couldn't help but glance at his fingers, calloused, steady, the same ones that had just held my ankle days ago. You want to come up? I asked, almost surprised at myself. He looked over, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Only if you want me to. I do. Inside, everything felt louder. The hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the floorboards, the way the door clicked shut behind him. I dropped my keys on the counter and turned to find him standing near the entrance, unsure of where to go next. This still feel okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. Just weird seeing you in my apartment after all this time. Weird good or weird bad. Weird like teenage me would have passed out if he knew this was coming, he chuckled. I think teenage me would have just run away. Figures, I said, stepping closer. He didn't move, just waited, letting me come to him. When I reached up and touched his chest, right over the soft fabric of his t-shirt, I felt his breath hitch. You sure you're ready for this? I asked. Luke looked at me with that same softness from earlier. I don't know what I'm doing. But, yeah, I'm sure. I nodded, then leaned in again. The second kiss was different. Less careful. Less afraid. My hand found the side of his neck, and his slid around my waist like it belonged there. And it didn't stop. We didn't rush. Didn't stumble toward the bedroom or tear it closed like a bad movie scene. We just moved, slowly, like we were figuring out how to touch each other for the first time, and realizing we actually wanted to. At some point, we ended up on the couch. Him on one end, me on the other, our legs tangled in the middle. My head was on his chest, His fingers were tracing slow, distracted circles on my arm. "I've never done this," he said quietly. I looked up. "Done what?" Felt this calm. "With someone. Like I don't have to be anything other than what I am." I swallowed hard. Because I got it. Because it scared the hell out of me, too. "I know what you mean," I said. He kissed the top of my head. Just once. And then we just stayed there. In the quiet. In whatever this was starting to become. The next morning, he was still there. That shouldn't have surprised me. He hadn't said he was leaving. Hadn't made any awkward excuse or fake stretch like he had somewhere to be. But still, waking up to the weight of his arm across my waist felt unreal. Luke Talley, asleep in my bed. His breathing slow. Face buried in my pillow like he'd done it 100 times before. Like it was normal. I lay still for a while, just watching the early light creep through the blinds, casting soft lines across his bare shoulder. I should have felt weird. I didn't. What I felt was something quieter, stranger, safe. Eventually he stirred, groaning softly as he rolled onto his back. His arms slid off me and his eyes opened slowly, blinking against the light. "Hey," he said, voice rough with sleep. "What time is it?" "Little after 8. "Shit," he murmured, rubbing his face. "I was supposed to check in at work by 9. I raised an eyebrow. "You always sleep through your alarms?" He chuckled. "Only when the bed's more comfortable than I expected." I snorted. "Smooth." He looked at me then. Not just looked, but looked, like he was checking if I was okay, if I regretted anything, if I was about to tell him to put his clothes back on and get out. But I didn't. Instead I said, "Want coffee?" He smiled. "God, yes." We sat on my couch, 2 mugs in hand, legs brushing. Still shirtless, still half hungover from the night before. But in that kind of way, that felt earned. He looked down into his mug, then said, "You sure about this?" I paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean us. Whatever this is, I've got baggage, a lot of it." "Yeah," I said. "So do I." He nodded. Like, that wasn't the answer he expected, but it was the one he hoped for. He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't want to hurt you. Not again. You didn't hurt me last night." "No," he said quickly. "Not last night. I mean back then. And now I'm here, in your bed, acting like I can just rewrite all of that." I set my mug down and turned toward him. "You can't rewrite it," I said. "But you can own it, and from what I can tell, you already have." He looked down again, then back up. "You're a better person than I am." "Probably," I said, deadpan. He laughed, shaking his head. "God, you're still sharp as hell." I leaned back. "So what now?" Luke took a breath. "Now we try. Slowly, if you're good with that. I don't want this to be a one-night thing. Not if we can help it." I nodded, letting that settle in my chest. "I'm good with slow," I said. "But I'm not hiding." "Neither am I," he said without hesitation. I believed him. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. We kept doing physical therapy sessions, but after hours, we were something else. He'd stay over sometimes. We'd cook, watch movies, fall asleep on the couch. The first time he held my hand in public, he looked a little nervous. But he didn't let go. And when one of his old friends saw us and did a double take, Luke just nodded politely and kept walking. Later that night, I asked him, "You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "I think so." "You sure?" Luke turned to me, eyes soft but steady. "I spent years lying about who I was. I don't want to do that anymore. We weren't perfect. Sometimes I'd snap about something small, like the way he left dishes in the sink, or how he still had old team photos in his apartment. He'd get quiet, shut down, like he was afraid of slipping back into old patterns. But we talked. We worked through it. He'd tell me stories from high school I never heard, about his dad, who expected him to be the golden boy, About his brother, who figured it out before Luke did and never said anything. About how he used to think being gay meant losing everything: his friends, his team, his image. "I wish I'd talked to you back then," he said once, "instead of pushing you away. You weren't ready. Still," he said, "you deserved better." "I still do," I teased. He smiled. "I'm trying to be that." And he was. Not perfect, not polished, but real, and real was more than enough for me. One evening, I was at his place. A simple one-bedroom with too many plants and a half-assembled bookshelf in the corner. We'd just finished dinner, something he cooked and I critiqued to death, even though it was actually pretty good. He was stretched out on the couch, feet in my lap, absently scrolling his phone while I massaged his ankle. "I've been thinking," he said suddenly. "Dangerous," I replied. He smirked. "Shut up." I waited. "About us," he said, locking his phone and setting it aside. "How it started. How weird it still feels sometimes." I nodded. "It's a little surreal." "Yeah," he said, propping himself up on one elbow. "But also kind of poetic." I gave him a look. "You're gonna have to explain that one." He sat up fully, legs shifting so our knees touched. "Back in high school, I made you feel small," he said. "I made fun of you, lied to myself, lied to everyone." I didn't interrupt. I let him speak. "And now I spend my days helping people heal. Physically, sometimes mentally. It's like I've been trying to undo the damage I caused. Not just to you, to myself too." He looked down, twisting a ring around his finger, something I'd never seen him wear before. Thin, silver, understated. I never said it out loud, but I was ashamed of who I was. Not just being into guys, but being someone who hurt people just to hide it. "You're not that person anymore," I said gently. "I know," he said. "But sometimes I still need to hear it." I leaned in. "You're not that person." He looked up, met my eyes, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then he reached out and took my hand. Not nervous, not shaky, just sure. "I think I love you," he said. The words hit like a quiet wave. No drama, no build-up, just truth. I swallowed. "Yeah?" He nodded once. "I'm not asking you to say it back. I just needed you to know." But I did say it back. Because I'd known it for a while, too. Months passed. The ankle healed. The sessions ended. But Luke didn't. He was there. Every morning I woke up late and stole his hoodie. Every Friday night when we'd collapse on the couch with takeout. Every time I had a bad day and didn't feel like talking, but needed someone close anyway, his hand always found mine. He started telling people, not in some dramatic coming out speech, but in quiet ways. At a friend's wedding, he introduced me as his boyfriend. At a family dinner, he sat a little closer, didn't flinch when his brother raised an eyebrow. "I'm happy," he said. "That's all they need to know." And they accepted it. Maybe not overnight, but over time. A year later, I found myself standing in a park, one of those community 5 kiloseconds where he was volunteering at the first aid tent. I watched him tape a guy's knee, crack a joke, flash that same soft smile that used to make my chest ache in high school, for a totally different reason. He caught me watching and winked. Later, when his shift ended, we walked home together. His arm slung over my shoulder, my hand in his back pocket. Comfortable, ordinary, ours. And somewhere between the sidewalk cracks and streetlights, I realized something. He didn't just help me heal my ankle. He helped me heal everything I never said out loud. And somehow, in all the quiet in-between moments, I think I helped him do the same.